The debate over surrogacy is back in German politics. The catalyst is Jens Spahn. The CDU politician and then chairman of the CDU-CSU parliamentary group in the Bundestag became a father through a surrogate mother in the US along with his husband. Surrogacy is prohibited in Germany, and Spahn had previously spoken out politically against legalizing it. His decision therefore sparked accusations of political double standards. On July 18, Spahn stepped down as chairman of the Conservative parliamentary group. He explained that his personal happiness and political office were no longer compatible. Politically, however, that of course does not settle the issue. The German Embryo Protection Act of 1991 prohibits surrogacy in Germany. Specifically prohibited are the arrangement of surrogacy, medical treatment, the implantation of an egg, and all medical supervision of the process. However, parents who use a surrogate mother are not liable to prosecution. So, should Germany maintain its ban on surrogacy or change the rules?
I do think it's good that it's illegal, because I feel that it turns a woman's body into an object that can be exploited. It's good that it's illegal, because I also find it difficult when women do it just for the money.
Everyone has the right to do whatever they want with their own body. If the issue is legalized, it should be well regulated. It's not just same-sex couples, it could also be heterosexual couples who want to have a child but can't conceive because the woman or the man is not fertile. Then it does make sense.
In the German parliament, a cross-party majority supports a ban on surrogacy. Above all, the Conservative parties leading the governing coalition, the CDU and the CSU, remain committed to a blanket ban. Among other things, they warn against the exploitation of women and the commercialization of pregnancy.
This is not an issue that concerns only women. It's a deeply ethical issue. How do we treat human beings? Do we treat them as commodities and the like? And that is why it is a matter of general social and political importance. And the issue has been decided very clearly in Germany.
But there are those who advocate for reform. The Commission on Reproductive Self-Determination and Reproductive Medicine, established by the last government, had recommended allowing so-called altruistic surrogacy under strict legal conditions. Under this arrangement, the surrogate mother would not receive any money for carrying the child. Supporters of reform point to people who are unable to have children and note that many German citizens travel abroad for surrogacy. Critics see significant risks, above all to the surrogate mother's physical and mental health and to the child. Helmut Frister, chair of the German Ethics Council, believes that cases of altruistic surrogacy are conceivable in principle but difficult to implement in practice. However, Frister says there should be an open debate on the issue.
So far, this has been largely taboo. Surrogacy violates human dignity. That's what was stated in the coalition agreement of the last CDU-SPD coalition. And that is certainly not sufficient justification.
The debate centers not only on whether surrogacy should be permitted, but also on how Germany should deal with a practice that is legal abroad but remains prohibited within the country. So, the debate on surrogacy is in full swing, but what might new regulations look like and what are the key legal and ethical issues involved? We discussed this with Professor Dr. Susanne Lilian Gössel of the University of Bonn. She's a professor of law and she was a member of the Expert Commission on Reproductive Self-Determination and Reproductive Medicine that was installed by the former German government. Professor Gössel, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
You were a member of the expert commission that presented results back in 2024. Nothing happened though, and now the Jens Spahn case has reignited the debate on surrogacy. In your view, what does this case say about Germany's approach to surrogacy?
It says, or it shows very well that we have like an imbalance between surrogacy and the child born of surrogacy abroad and the situation for people who don't have the possibilities to go abroad and obtain a surrogacy or a child. Because the German courts recognize a court decision which distributes paternity to the intended parents after surrogacy, usually. Not in all cases, but usually. But on the other hand, in Germany, it's strictly forbidden to pursue a baby made by surrogacy.
And of course, in the end, one of the conclusions or one of the recommendations of your commission was to allowing so-called altruistic surrogacy in certain cases under certain conditions. What are those?
It's very important to protect the woman who acts as a surrogate mother, because we see from other countries, not the US, but from Asia, and other countries, that there can be an exploitation of the women, and that they can be pregnant under terrible circumstances just to fulfill the needs of people from the West who have a lot of money. And then the clinics and those who help to find a surrogate mother earn the money, but the surrogate mothers usually only gained a little bit. And that was one of the reasons to say we don't want an exploitation. We don't even want the danger of exploitation of women in Germany. So it has to be altruistic, and also it has to be altruistic from the point of view of the clinics, that the people who help connect surrogate mothers and intended parents, for example, also don't gain money by doing it. So all the commercialization should be excluded. That was one of our conclusions. But the other point, which I think is also very important, is that if you legalize surrogacy, you have to make sure that the intended parents can be forced to take responsibility for the child. If the surrogate mother wants to give it freely to them, that they cannot escape afterwards, because there were also terrible cases where the intended parents looked at the child and said, oh no, we don't want to have it. And then they left the child with the surrogate mother who didn't have the means to support it.
So, as you also said, that it's about protecting the mother. But of course, critics say that even altruistic surrogacy or under altruistic surrogacy, there's a lot of pressure for women, for the surrogate mothers involved. How can you, or how would you imagine a government enforcing that the mother is, or the mothers are supported, protected, and not put under too much pressure?
Yeah, that's like one of the key points where a government has to be very, very cautious, because that's a big danger, that there can be social pressure, monetary pressure, etc. And therefore, it's important that the whole process, finding the surrogate mother, but also during the pregnancy and afterwards, the whole process is monitored, for example, by an independent body, like a commission, which can also analyze whether the surrogate mother knows what she's doing actually, that she knows the dangers, the risks, etc., but also her rights. And then it's important that even after birth, the surrogate mother has the possibility to say, I want to keep the baby. I feel like a mother, and the intended parents will not have the baby, or will have some rights to see it. If the father, for example, is genetically related, he can recognize parenthood and then be the father. But the surrogate mother, that she cannot be excluded against her will. That's important. And that's like focusing on her autonomy and making sure that every step in the whole process is freely chosen by her.
And how do you assess what reason, what argument weighs more? Because of course you have arguments. It's a clearly a debatable topic. You have reasons for it, be it an unfulfilled child wish, or reasons against it, as we just talked about, pressure, or the pure financial motivation that I guess the big majority sees as problematic. How do you weigh these issues against each other and then come to a conclusion and a recommendation for possible political actions?
Well, the German constitution is what gives the direction. And the most important part of the German constitution is the human dignity. And here the human dignity of the woman who acts as a surrogate mother is in question, if she can be forced to sell her body. If she does it voluntarily, then her autonomy makes her a subject and not an object which would be treated as a thing. And then this would be a violation of her human dignity. So her autonomy has to be protected under all circumstances, because as soon as she's not acting autonomously, her dignity is in danger, and then the German constitution says no.
The head of, or the chair of the German Ethics Council also said that he could imagine altruistic surrogacy to happen, to be introduced in certain cases, but he said that, or he had doubts that in the mid or long term it's possible to enforce these measures that we just talked about and protect the people involved. What's your take on this? Like, how difficult is implementing, and how likely is it to get all the actors that are needed to implement this on one table even?
Well, I think it might be a challenge. I wouldn't say it's easy to implement it, but I think it's not impossible, because what we all can agree on is that we have to protect children and that we have to protect the women. I think there is no disagreement that those are the two people who have to be protected under all circumstances. And then there are countries like Portugal, for example, or the UK, they are now reassessing it, which have examples where altruistic surrogacy can work. So it shows that countries with similar values as our country have managed to implement surrogacy measures. So I think Germany could also do it, but we have to have a political will. And I have the feeling that the parties, not only the conservative parties, but also the other parties, are still not really sure what they want. And I think we need a political and a agreement in society what we really want, and we need a discussion. So I'm really, under these circumstances, happy that Jens Spahn ignited, as you said, the discussion again, because we need the discussion.
Of course, one part of the discussion is surrogacy itself, whether to introduce it in Germany or not, whether to legalize it or not. But the other part is the reality that surrogacy is illegal, and that people, couples, people turning to other countries, to, for example, the US, like Jens Spahn and his husband, to surrogate mothers over there, where it's legal, where it's regulated, but also where it's a huge business, where there are a lot of regulations put on the mothers, the women there, and a lot of restrictions involved. So is that, I mean, double standard was a term that was mentioned a lot in the Spahn debate, but is that a model that you see as still kind of valid today, or how do you assess that?
The US model, you mean?
Yes.
Well, I mean, the US-American society is different from ours. So like a commercialization of everything is more common. But what I also see is that in the US, I mean, there are a lot of investigations now, analysis, how surrogacy works and how it works for the children and for the women. And the whole debate is more relaxed. And in California, for example, there are studies that the surrogate mother and the intended parents keep the contact after the child is born, and she becomes kind of part of the family. And she's accompanied by an attorney when she negotiates her agreements, which makes it also more autonomous for her. Like, her negotiation possibilities are stronger. And so I think there isn't the imbalance and the exploitation of women, which is always core of the debate. On the one hand, because the society reacts to it, and on the other hand, because, as you said, there are those mechanisms who protect the autonomy of the surrogate mother.
Is, though, the ban in Germany just shifting the problem elsewhere, abroad? Because, of course, there is the US model, but there are also other countries that offer surrogacy that, where financial motivation plays a big role, which kind of, but also it's not under German jurisdiction. So to kind of follow whether everything is regulated or whether everything is ethically correct and lawfully is harder, because it's not our business, basically. So how would you say this current debate is in any way responsible for that at all, or what is your take on this?
I think that's one of the big problems, that people are forced to go abroad And if they had a lot of money, like really a lot of money, they can go to California, where also a court looks over the proceeding and makes sure the women's rights are protected, the child is well, the intended parents take responsibility, etc. But there are some countries which usually come more from the global south, where we really have the exploitation of women, or at least we don't know, because there is no court who looks over it. And then we have sometimes notices from terrible circumstances where women are forced to have the children, etc. And so I think that's like a double standard, a little bit, to say we want to protect our women here, but if people go abroad and abuse women there, then we don't care. Then I think that's a double standard, because we cannot really control which happens abroad, but we could regulate and control what happens in Germany.
Last question.
And we have a big example from adoption. Like 30, 40 years ago, there was a lot of possibilities of child trafficking because international adoption was not regulated. And it was so terrible that states came together to make an agreement and install possibilities to secure that the children are really adopted, that they are given up voluntarily by the parents or don't have parents, and that there is not this abuse. And this is missing in the surrogacy case, and that's a huge problem and allows this abuse.
Okay, last question. Of course, the debate has been reignited, as you said, but what would you wish for how the debate develops, and what could be like a key takeaway that could even lead to potential political actions and the legalization? So what do you wish for this debate is worth in the end?
I have the problem, I have the impression at the moment that a lot of debates cross over. Like there is the double standard of Jens Spahn, and on the other hand, the protection of the women abroad and the protection of the women in Germany. And I think it would be really helpful to focus on what happens in Germany, and that the parties make their mind up what they really want. And then when they know their interests, we want to protect the women, we want to protect LGBTIQ intended parents, etc., that they then come together and find a solution which hopefully finds a compromise in the middle. That would be my wish. But I think the debate is missing. The debate now is very extreme in one direction or the other, but we don't have a debate in the middle.
Professor Dr. Gössel, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.